Good afternoon, everyone. It's January 17th, 2020. I'm Eric. I'm here at shtfplan.com. Article was originally posted by Brandon Smith at Altmarket. The Virginia gun rights conflict, best and worst case scenarios. To clarify something from an earlier video, just because I talked about a Netflix show about the Messiah doesn't necessarily mean I support the actors or any of that. I'm simply saying that that's exactly the same way we would treat the second coming of Jesus Christ. I was not promoting the show, although I do admit I found it to be a rather enjoyable show. Apparently, I didn't know this. Lisa Cheney informed me in the comments section that the lead actor, the so-called Messiah of the show, is a woman. So she told me something I didn't know. Thank you, Lisa. All right. Virginia. Part of me hopes that Virginia explodes into a bloody civil war, and part of me hopes that it doesn't. Part of me hopes that the governor and government officials, both federal and state, just let the rallies happen. But I don't think this is going to be the case, unfortunately. But in Brandon's article, Trump impeachment and Civil War scenario, I warn that conservatives and leftists are being pushed to the brink of a shooting war using various methods of social manipulation and fourth-generation warfare, and that this conflict, if dictated by gatekeepers of the false left-right paradigm, would only benefit establishment elites in the long run. Now, let me stop right there. He is correct about that. However, it may also provide us the opportunity to capture these so-called elites and try them for the endless list of crimes against the public and humanity itself. Internal division among the public is designed to keep us at each other's throats while losing focus on the real enemies, which are those very people I just mentioned. Hardline Democrats and the social justice cult are merely a symptom of the disease. They are not the source of the disease, however. I also acknowledge that the rift between conservatives and the political left has become so extreme that reconciliation is almost impossible. I would say probably we're past being able to reconcile the two ideologies. It's not going to happen now. War might be unavoidable, and I think it is, and the globalists love it. If they can pretend like they had nothing to do with creating tensions, if conservatives are so blinded by anger against Democrats that they refuse to admit that some of their own political leaders, including dickhead Donald Trump, have been co-opted, the elites win. The danger in any civil war is that both sides end up being manipulated and controlled, and that the situation is maneuvered towards an outcome that only serves the interests of a select few. And we must see to it that this does not happen. We must see to it that these motherfuckers are captured and put where they belong. Virginia may be a test bed, a trial run for a nationwide conflagration, and if it does hit a point where state officials compel a violent response from the citizenry, then it is important that liberty advocates remain vigilant and steer clear of incompetent or controlled leaders. And there's going to be lots of people out there trying to be leaders. Here's something to keep in mind, okay? If they are pushing for that role, if they're pushing to be the leader, if they're trying hard to be the leader, they should be rejected and exposed and captured. It is also important that they remember there is a much larger agenda at play here. The Democrats may be useful idiots fueling that agenda, but most of them are oblivious to their role. Our fight is not with the Democrats. Our fight is with the globalists that influence them, the same globalists that are trying to influence us. Don't let them influence you. Don't be weak-minded. Don't. One good way to assure that you think clearly about this is to remove any and all emotion that you have. It is then where you will see that both sides are equally evil, both sides are equally corrupt, both sides want to enslave us in a very direct and real manner, not this free range shit that we have now, but in a direct, hands-on, real manner. Okay? Now, people, you could say that I'm crazy all you want, but here's the fact. Okay? Fact is, governments are responsible for more death than any disease on the earth. I could argue that probably governments are a disease, a virus. So, don't be influenced by these viruses. First and foremost, we have to address the propaganda, because all wars begin first with the public consciousness. The current situation in Virginia remains a battle of political rhetoric and fluid interpretations of the law. Here are the arguments I've seen from the political left so far on the issue of the Second Amendment sanctuaries. They argue that sanctuary county resolutions are purely symbolic and have no force of law behind them. But here's the thing, they don't need the force of law behind them. All they need behind them are lots of people with guns. They don't need the law behind them. This is rather naive, however. It's a naive position as it ignores the fundamentals. The force of law is neither compelled by conscience or it is compelled by violence. I said neither, and I should have said either. So I will rephrase. The force of law is either compelled by conscience, or it is compelled by violence. And what do you think? Which one do you think is the most likely one? Conscience or violence? We all know that the government is itching to inflict upon the American people a bloodbath. We all know this. The law itself is meaningless without these two factors. If groups of citizens choose not to follow a law because they find it morally reprehensible, there is nothing the state can do except try to frighten them into compliance with the threat of violence. The concept of law by itself has no energy, and claiming that something is right because it is now law is not a valid argument. Yeah, I mean, and just because it's legal for a woman in a lot of places to have abortions does not make that action moral. Just because there's laws out there that enable old perverted men to marry young teenage girls does not make it moral. In the case of anti-gun laws in Virginia, the vast majority of counties in the state and the people in those counties have made it clear that they will not comply. The leftists have completely ignored this fact by simply saying they have to comply because the law says so. And this is what will lead to war. It is the attitude that we must bend our morals, our will, ourselves to the whims of these fucking control freaks. Leftists argue that state laws supersede county authority and there is no legal standing for sanctuary resolutions. It is funny they're saying that, because I recall them backing up sanctuary cities for undocumented immigrants. Or was that just a brain fart that I had? Must be. The problem with this argument is that it ignores the fact that constitutional protections provided by the Bill of Rights supersede all other laws, including the laws prohibiting felons for having these weapons. It does not matter if attempts are being made by state governments or the federal government to degrade constitutional rights. The people are empowered to refuse and fight against any laws which violate constitutional rights. For example, Democrats often bring up the history of Jim Crow laws as a rationale for federal intervention in the legal affairs of states. Jim Crow laws were segregation laws passed by the state governments, and in many cases there was resistance on a public level to these laws. Democrats like to cite Jim Crow laws whenever conservatives argue for states' rights and 10th Amendment nullification of unconstitutional federal laws. They have conveniently memory hold issues whenever state laws are working in favor of their agenda. The bottom line is this: the Constitution and Bill of Rights take precedence over all other laws in the U.S. And if Democrats are going to use legal technicalities as their foundation for draconian gun control measures, then they really have no leg to stand on. And keep in mind, people, there are also Republicans who support some of these draconian legislations. Not all of them, but some of them. They have their own draconian laws they like to force upon us. If their argument is that citizens and countries have no legal right to nullify state laws, no matter how immoral or unconstitutional, then what would they say if a state government brought back Jim Crow or legalized slavery as it existed back then, by the way? Slavery is still legalized. Virginia's gun control efforts are no different. Leftists assert that new laws in Virginia are standard because similar laws have been passed in other states. This is the totalitarian tiptoe at work. Once an unconstitutional law is passed in California, New York, or Illinois, this therefore means that the laws have become standard. It's kind of like consensus, and thus are acceptable. An unconstitutional law is an unconstitutional law. It does not matter how many states pass such a law and proclaim it normal or standard. The people of Virginia have announced en masse that they have no intention of following new gun control laws. The people have spoken. Over 90% of counties in Virginia have passed Second Amendment resolutions with the support of the citizenry. You think you live in a democracy? Well, that right there in itself proves to you that we do not. Democrats gaining seats in an election does not give them the power to deny constitutional rights to Virginians. Beyond this, the Virginia law or laws are nowhere near standard. Clearly, Virginia is being used as a testing ground for red flag laws in particular, which are the most concerning. Red flag laws allow gun confiscation without due process based on ambiguous accusations backed often by zero evidence. It is a prosecution and punishment without representation or defense. Red flag gun laws are a means by which the state can violate your rights while circumventing due process. Let us make note here that leftists aren't the only people that are pushing for red flag laws. Your beloved Donald Trump is a vocal supporter of them as well. Your traitor, Donald Trump. But you fucking morons, you know, like Dave Hodges, Lisa Haven, Mike Adams, AMTV, and the list goes on and on and on. At least Tucker Carlson is doing a fairly good job of not being biased. The numerous laws Virginia's government hopes to implement set the stage for the uh, incremental removal of all gun rights. Currently, at least 4 of these laws have been advanced by the Virginia State Judiciary Committee, and many more are expected to be implemented by the end of this month. They are pushing the envelope to see how far they can move the boundary of what is standard when it comes to anti-gun laws. The people of Virginia know this is the agenda. It has always been the leftist agenda, not to mention a globalist agenda, to seek out total disarmament of the population while claiming they only want reasonable safeguards. You know, the most reasonable safeguard is that 9mm in your pocket, that AR-15 on your back, that machete on your hip, that knife in your hand. They are the only and most reasonable safeguards. This is unacceptable and will not be tolerated, which we will see, won't we? I mean, the people of the United States allowed the federal government to kill how many innocent women and children in Waco, Texas? We are talking about people who are fucking psychopaths. Leftists argue that law enforcement authorities that refuse to enforce new gun laws risk losing their official immunity. What exactly is official immunity? They're supposed to be held to the same standards we are. There should be no immunity. And I'm not sure that official immunity has anything to do with the enforcement of gun laws. It is meant to protect law enforcement officers from civil litigation while conducting normal duties. This sounds more like a thinly veiled threat against county officials and law enforcement who refuse to comply. And it's not an empty threat. He says it is, but it's not an empty threat. If they get their way, the officials who refuse to comply will be put in the gulags right next to you. County officials cannot be compelled by the state to actively enforce unconstitutional laws, let alone unconstitutional gun control laws, nor can the state force a county to set aside funds for such an effort. In the case of county sheriffs, these are officials elected by the people of the county, and they answer to those people first, and the state government second. County officials can be punished for breaking the law, but they cannot be punished for not enforcing the law to an arbitrary degree that the state sees as acceptable. Leftists are pursuing other more aggressive avenues to enforce new gun laws. Representatives of the state government have threatened the possible use of the National Guard to force counties to comply. Okay, and look, please do not be delusioned into believing the National Guard wouldn't cooperate. They cooperated when school, compulsory school was implemented. They were used when segregation ended. And they will be used for this. Them, along with the law enforcement officers who are willing to cooperate. They have made a budget proposal for $6.5 million to form a new sex offense and firearms investigation unit, which they deny will be used as a goon squad to enter into sanctuary counties and enforce new gun laws by circumventing local law enforcement, much like the federal government uses the FBI or ATF to circumvent state authorities when it pleases them. Finally, the Virginia government is also seeking at least $250,000 to be allocated to prisons, and this is directly tied to the new gun laws and the people that will be imprisoned by them. Just think about this for a minute. Think about this. People who have never harmed another soul, one day become felons, all because some fucking loser, psychopathic control freak decides, we're not worthy of life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. The governor of Virginia claims that he supports grandfathering in existing guns as long as they are registered in the new state database. Do not ever register your weapons. Again, do not buy weapons from stores. The black market has plenty of weapons. And you know who knows who has the weapons? The dude or dudette that you buy the weapons from, and you. That's it. I know. I sound an awful lot like a criminal, huh? But fuck you. Fuck you. It's common sense. It's common sense to hide your capabilities from people who are clearly your enemy. Of course, gun owners know from history that the first step towards total confiscation is forced registration. The mainstream media has suggested that anyone who thinks these budget changes are in preparation for arresting gun owners is a conspiracy theorist. They had better be right, because the government of Virginia should know that if they did compel such actions, it would be a detrimental mistake. Detrimental. The National Guard of Virginia is made up of the citizens of Virginia, and many of these people may not comply either. A lot of them may not, but on the other hand, a lot of them will. They will. They will gladly comply, just for the opportunity to shed blood. If they do, or if the state establishes an enforcement arm to target individual citizens to make examples out of them, the most likely outcome is that people will defend themselves and their constitutional rights. People on both sides might be hurt in the process, and of course those people will be declared domestic terrorists. These people, if captured alive, will be put to death. The question then arises, are these laws worth dying for? On both sides. I can say with some authority as a longtime activist in the liberty movement that the majority of conservatives are willing to risk death to protect their rights, and I have to disagree with them. There is only a very small percentage of people who are willing to go all the way. However, that small percentage is enough to win. Are state authorities willing to risk death to enforce unconstitutional laws? Because that is where this situation is headed. Leftists can claim that Second Amendment sanctuaries are not comparable to illegal immigrant sanctuaries. They're correct. The two situations are not the same. Illegal immigration is not a constitutionally protected right, and gun ownership is. This article goes on for quite some time, and I really, we've almost got through it all, so I might as well go ahead and knock the rest of it off for you. Okay. One can try to make a moral argument in favor of protecting illegal immigrants from deportation, but there is no legal argument. And I agree with that. There are a lot of these people that come here that want nothing more than to be in a better place than they were, or want nothing more to be in a better place than where they were. They want a life. Now, I'm not for a lot of these people. I'm not against a lot of them either. And I could easily present a far superior moral argument against illegal immigration than they could ever in favor of it. I would have to write a whole other article to cover this issue in depth, but it is important to point out the double standard and hypocrisy inherent in the leftist position. Leftists argue that this is only about Virginia, and nothing could be further from the truth. This is about your right to fucking exist. It's not about your gun. It's about your right to exist. It's about your right to be able to defend yourself from anybody, but mostly your government. Conservatives don't see it that way. A conflict in Virginia will likely attract thousands of people from outside the state because the view will be that the line is being drawn there. And it is. It may also spread beyond Virginia into other states with unconstitutional gun control measures. Now, it's important for conservatives, especially those that actually live in Virginia, to understand that there will be con men and shysters who will show up out of nowhere and try to exploit the situation to elevate their own careers or public image. They will try to make as much money as they can while shamelessly self-promoting. They will pretend to help while offering substandard advice and substandard training. And if the manure or shit hits the fan, these guys will suddenly disappear as quickly as they arrived. There will also be people who will try to steer the conflict towards a left versus right paradigm, as I noted earlier. Sanctuary counties should maintain local leadership and local representation in these matters to avoid being manipulated. If people outside the state want to help, then they should be fine with doing this under the supervision and management of the locals, and I agree with that. The best possible scenario would be that the state government of Virginia realizes that it's not worth it to try to enforce unconstitutional gun laws and that the risks are far too high to manage. They would abandon such endeavors and recognize that counties will not comply, even if they try to apply leverage on them. My suspicion is that the state will try to enforce laws quietly and incrementally at first, arresting a handful of violators and activists over the course of several months to make examples out of them while test running red flag laws for backdoor confiscation. They will wait for activists to quiet down and go home. The worst case scenario is that this is an establishment beta test for the rest of the country, and that they may want to start a conflict in hopes that this will spread into a national civil war. This kind of scheme would require accelerated and violent enforcement of gun laws by Democrats in Virginia to elicit an immediate response. If this is the case and a wider conflict is triggered, conservatives must not lose sight of the bigger picture. The globalists should be the focus of our ire. The Democrats are being used. A conflict based only on the political division will mean defeat for us all and a win for the elites. Unless, of course, there are some people out there, a group of like-minded people who go after these elites while they're distracted with this, we'll call it their Civil War project. I think probably if it does pop off that way, if people do start dying, a lot of people, I think this is going to open the door to the UN. We already have agreements with them in place. The Strong Cities Initiative comes to mind. Again, people, I don't know everything. I can't possibly know everything that is going on, but goddamn, it's enough. It's enough for me to be able to tell you with a straight face that if we don't start acting, we're all going to perish. Anyway, thought I'd bring this news to you. I hope all of you have a great day. I hope all of you really think about the consequences that will be forced upon all of us and our families. Please do like, subscribe, share, donate, and until next time, kill the state, live free.